When I bought a Cessna 182 a few years ago, the reality of airplane ownership surprised me in some good ways and in some challenging ways. First, I ended up flying by myself far more than I thought I would. 9 out of 10 flights are probably solo, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But when you're evaluating whether or not to get a plane, you're processing that with your friends and family, you probably get a lot of voices saying like, dude, go for it. I'd totally fly with you. That sounds fun. Let's take trips together. You get all these encouraging voices, which is great, but then you're kind of surprised like, oh, okay. That happens sometimes, but most of the times, your friends are busy, your family doesn't want to go, etc. And you find yourself flying by yourself a lot more than you thought you might. Like, yes, I've still done some family trips and had a lot of awesome memories with other people on the plane, but if you're thinking you routinely need a large airplane to carry around a bunch of people because everyone's gonna always be wanting to go with you, just try to temper that expectation and remember, you might fly alone a lot. And so try not to get an airplane that's totally overkill for you when you're just solo. The best advice I've heard and that I agree with on this is to try to find a plane that's gonna fit your average mission 80% of the time or more. Basically, don't buy a plane that you're only gonna need, like actually need 1% of the time because you're gonna load it up and go far, because that is literally just 1% of the time. And 99% of the time, it's gonna be overkill for your mission. The second reality that surprised me was the timing of expenses and how that would actually feel. So in other words, in renting, you only get a bill when you fly. And so while it sucks to get a $500 bill to go watch a sunset, the silver lining is at least you know you can control when you incur expenses. You can kind of turn it on and turn it off. Whereas when you own the airplane, you're still gonna have expenses regardless of whether or not you're flying. You still have the hangar expense, you still have maintenance, insurance, other things. And so it can be really demoralizing sometimes, especially when there's like bad weather for a few weeks and then your airplane's at annual and then you get sick and you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like I've flown one time over the last month or two and I'm still writing checks. That can be really hard to stomach at first. Now on the other hand, sometimes it's awesome because some of the flights just feel free. It's not free, but it feels free. Where the airplane already has fuel in it, you go fly around for a few hours, you come back, you push it back in the hangar, and you go home and you never take your wallet out of your back pocket. That's awesome. And so because of that, it can kind of feel like a roller coaster a little bit versus renting. And so for me, what has helped me to kind of stomach the ups and downs of that has really been to try to live by 2 rules, keep it simple, and then just not sweat the roller coaster too much. Rule number 1 is to live within your means. Basically spend less than you make. That way, if you make a little or you make a lot, you'll never be upside down financially.
We got no food, we got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off!
And then rule number 2 is to intentionally decide where your surplus time, energy, effort, resources, money, etc. is going to be dedicated based on what's important to you in your life. So come up with a plan on how you're gonna spend your time and efforts and resources and why. Now everyone's gonna have a different take on number 2 here, but for me, what it's looked like is my wife and I feel comfortable spending a portion of our money and time and resources on aviation. That's not where we want all of it to go. Like if all of it was going to that, I think that would be a problem for us. So you'll have to come up with your own kind of balanced approach. Maybe it's not even a balanced approach. For us, it's a balanced approach. And that way we're not gonna really feel bad spending on money on aviation, as long as it doesn't break rule number 1. As long as we're still living within our means, then for us, the ups and downs are okay, and that's how I don't sweat it too much. Another reality that surprised me was that I thought I would fly like every weekend owning a plane. Why wouldn't you? Now, I definitely fly on the weekends, but now since having kids, actually my most consistent time to fly, believe it or not, is weekday mornings, really early before the kids get up and before I start work. Now, as they get older, maybe that'll change. Right now I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, so it's kind of a tall order to ask my wife, like, hey, can you sit in the back, manage both of them just so we can go get a hamburger somewhere, which is probably more fun for me anyways than anybody else. It's just like I want to spend time on the weekends with my family, and so flying is not the best family activity for us right now, and maybe that'll change as they get older. But for now, I'm not a weekend warrior, I'm kind of a weekday warrior, if there is such a thing, but that kind of surprised me. Another reality that surprised me in like the best way possible has been the freedom that comes with airplane ownership. I obviously expected to be able to go on trips and visit new places and things, but I didn't fully appreciate how awesome this actually would be. Like sure, the $100 hamburger trips are really, really fun, but what's been the best, what's been the coolest has been going to places like the mountains of Idaho, the mountain desert of West Texas, which isn't really great until you get there, and then it's totally worth the trip. You know, going to places like the scenic beauty of northern Arkansas, flying along the coastline, and so much more. Quick story on this, I remember about a year and a half ago, my wife and I flew down to Galveston for a wedding that she was in, and the kids stayed with the grandparents, so it was just the 2 of us. We flew down there. It's one of her best friend's weddings, and on the day of the wedding, she was obviously tied up the whole day, and so I had the whole day free, and I asked some people like, hey, I'm I'm gonna go fly if anyone wants to go. Nobody wanted to go, so it's just me. So I flew up and down the coast, just taking it all in, flew up in the Galveston Bay, stopped at Conroe, got the $100 hamburger at Conroe, the Black Walnut Cafe, I think. And that's an awesome place to go if you're anywhere near Texas. It's worth the trip. It's a really cool spot. Still flew around, got back in time for the wedding, no problem, and went to the wedding that night. So all the husbands are kind of catching up that day. Hey, what'd you guys do today? What'd you do with your time? And I was like, hey, I just went on this really cool adventure, and here's some of the pictures I took. And none of them could believe it. It's like, you just went flying all day? And so, I don't say that to brag, like, I have an airplane, look at me. I'm just saying, these are the kinds of adventures that you can go on, and it becomes a really normal thing for you as an airplane owner. And on top of that, the other thing that I did not expect was that there are some places scattered across the United States that have now become really, really special places to me that I never even knew existed before and aren't anywhere near me. Like in my daydreams of owning an airplane, I guess that I just thought about like 200-mile radius. I was thinking, I don't know, I just couldn't really think much bigger than that because I fully did not appreciate like the true freedom that you get when you own an airplane. And it's not just places 200 miles away. There are places 700 miles away, 1,500 miles away that are actually really accessible when you own the airplane. Idaho in particular, I think has some of the most scenic, and it's kind of challenging, but scenic flying the country has to offer. I think it's so underrated. And there's a really special place there that has a real special piece of my heart called Sulphur Creek Ranch. And the only way in and the only way out is either by airplane, horseback, or by foot. There's no roads anywhere. There's obviously no cell signal. And when you fly in, there's airplanes there, there's a few cabins, and then there's kind of a main cabin / restaurant. And they fly in the groceries, so to speak, once a week with a 206 that's sitting out there. And so when you go in, you're not presented with a menu. You just tell them how many people are eating. And so whatever they're making that day or that week, that is the menu. And I gotta tell you, it is probably the best breakfast I've ever had in my entire life. Partly due to where we were and how we got there, but also the food was just incredible. And it's stuff that I could not even appreciate that stuff existed before I owned an airplane. Another place that's closer and a lot easier to land at is Gaston's White River Resort in northern Arkansas. This is another completely underrated part of the country that's really accessible once you own an airplane. They've got, it's a longer than 3,000 foot, really well maintained grass strip. They've got dozens and dozens of cabins you can stay at, a really, really cool, really good restaurant there on the White River. And then they also have like world-class trout fishing, and the guides leave right there from the resort. And so the coolest thing about it is you go catch trout in the morning, and then you take it to the restaurant and they'll cook it up, they'll fry it, they'll pan sear it, they'll do whatever you want for dinner that night. And so this is a place that I've started to go a couple times a year because I never even knew it existed. And it's like a 7-hour drive from Dallas because the roads are so windy, but by airplane, it's like 2 hours away. And so this has become such a special place to me that I never would have known about or have it been accessible enough for me to go frequently, that now has just developed a really cool piece of my heart that I never even knew existed until I owned an airplane. So if this gets you excited about airplane ownership, I wanna let you know I just put out a full webinar that covers every single step, start to finish, of the airplane buying process. So if you're serious about owning an airplane now or in the future, I hope that this could be a really awesome resource for you. It's totally free, it's on the screen right now, and I'll see you there.